wouldn't it be cool to build a museum underneath the Lincoln Memorial? For 100 years, it's been more or less just a cave. Cold and damp and dark, there's no lighting in there. It
Was the idea behind it? Whose idea was it?
was just kind of forgotten by the Park Service. We're going to build a concrete building inside the terrace.
And also, the Lincoln Memorial isn't shut down. They may not be happy because it's under construction.
With the 8 million visitors that the Lincoln Memorial gets, an operational nightmare.
A very proud moment for Procon.
It's very awe-inspiring. You go in, it's 30-plus foot clear story, putting the marble steps back, the sun's rising over the Capitol building. Working on a historic building, don't draw on anything. Somebody was a pretty good artist, so was doing all kinds of doodles.
But it tells a great story, right?
100%.
Hello, welcome to The Build Up, a podcast by Procon Consulting. I'm your host, Jung. We have an exciting show here today. Hi, Patrick. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Q. Happy to be here.
Yeah, excited to be talking about the Lincoln Memorial. But before we begin and dive into the project, I wonder if we can get to know you a little bit and kind of paint us the picture. How did you get into construction? How did you land at Procon? And how did you get to be the project manager of this amazing Lincoln Memorial project?
Way back when I was a kid, my interest was always buildings. I just remember my earliest memories.
What kid isn't interested in buildings, right?
Yeah, but I was a little different because I just started drawing stuff, and it wasn't too long before I would start, trying to build buildings, and then I would get shelf paper. My grandmother always got me shelf paper, and I would start drawing what I had built, and then that was just something that I had always done, and I kind of developed into doing more and more drafting. So from that, I just developed loving architecture.
So yeah, how did you go from design, architecture, engineering, and then...
I thought I wanted to be an architect, and I still kind of wish I could be an architect, but when I started applying to colleges, all the architecture schools wanted a big portfolio, and you start looking at these folks who are architects and the kind of art portfolios they had.
Right.
I don't got that. I just draft nice. So I found architectural engineering, and I thought, well, that sounds amazing. Kind of technical. I get to do both. Bingo, I'll do architectural engineering.
I talk to a lot of people. It's interesting because I find that many of the people that I speak to stumble into construction. You might be the rare occasion where you wanted to be in construction or design from the very get-go. And so you're an anomaly more than anything else.
I know. And it's just funny that it worked for me. And because I went to Drexel University in Philly, and
Great school, by the way.
It is a great school. The co-ops are...
They're known for their co-op.
Thing. The whole selling point of Drexel was always the, getting
industry,
that experience of the industry.
So what was your first co-op experience?
My first was, for me, it was awesome. I worked for the City of Philadelphia Streets Department in the bridge section.
Gotcha.
Doing drafting. Whenever I had a chance, I would go flip through them and point out, the design drawings for the Walt Whitman and for the Ben Franklin Bridge and bridges.
There's a lot of history in Philadelphia.
And I loved doing the drafting. I found I was really good at drafting, and it was just a really great experience.
How did you get involved in the National Park Service?
I found this company in the D.C. area, and on their website, they posted that they had done work for the National Park Service, and I thought, well, that would be really cool if I get to do something like that. I wasn't hired to do that. I was hired to do a project for McKinley Tech High School. You could see Washington Monument and the Capitol building from it, so it was really cool reason to move to the D.C. area. I always had my eyes set on doing a national park project, and it wasn't until after that I finally kind of fell into, we need somebody to drive up and down the Eastern Shore to go work at Assateague, and that was my first National Park Service project.
So fast forward, 20-some plus years later, I was trying to do the math there, you land on one of the most visible projects Not many people in the audience may even know what's going on unless you've been by the monument. I wonder if you can tell us what the project is.
In a nutshell, we're renovating Abe's basement, which is more or less what it is. So it's a $50 million contract on just the construction side to renovate the undercroft of the Lincoln Memorial.
What is an undercroft?
So I should have looked up what the definition of undercroft
Well,
is.
you can use plain English. I mean, that's a bigger terminology, right?
So if you go to a church and they've got a crypt, it's just a fancy way to say the basement. So when you look at the Lincoln Memorial, way back in 1890, that was all wetlands and flat marshes and part of the Potomac. And then somewhere around 1890 through 1896, it started getting backfilled and filled in to become was then West Potomac Park. It's still, I think, officially West Potomac Park. And that's about when it was selected as the site for a memorial to Abraham Lincoln. And
what year was this?
I can't remember exactly when the design competition happened. It was in, say, 1905. And the foundations for the memorial itself started in 1914. And construction of the Lincoln Memorial went from 1914 to 1922. So probably, I think it was 18 months, 24 months to do the caissons to set for the memorial itself, the marble building. And then they built up the memorial. Then once the memorial itself was completed, they built the terrace around the memorial. So if you look at it, you've got the columns, you've got the chamber opening where Abe is, and then the marble steps down to a landing, and then it's granite. That was all they had built from, say, 1914 to 1920. That was about the only thing you could see. And then they built the terrace around it afterwards. So there's the terrace undercroft, and then there's the undercroft proper. And they built the memorial that high just so that you could really get the visual from the Capitol building. Otherwise, it would just be kind of at Potomac level and wouldn't be anywhere near as monumental. And it was only built to have that elevation and presence. There was no intention of ever really utilizing the basement.
Yeah, and I've had the opportunity to go down there, as you know. And so visually speaking, it's just a bunch of concrete piers or columns or piles that literally structurally supports the entire Lincoln Memorial.
Yeah, that's all it is. It's really just a basement. And it was just kind of forgotten by the Park Service.
But it's pretty grand and very expansive when you walk through it.
Yeah,
So-
it's very awe-inspiring.
Yeah.
You go in, it's 30-plus foot clear story from where you're standing on the utility level up to the top. And, yeah, it's just concrete.
Yeah.
But it's board-formed. And there's no bug holes and no honeycombing, and you can see where the grain of the boards. And then at the top, they have these really nice arches. So if you're standing on, there is a mezzanine that goes around the perimeter of the building, and you stand there looking to the west, and it's just the repetition of these arches. It is just an incredible space, and it's cold and damp and dark. There's no lighting in there. There was never intention to be lighting. There's barely any doors to get into the undercroft.
So how did this project come about? Like, what was the idea behind it? Whose idea was it? Do you have any information on that?
I do. So, looking at some of the documents that the architect shared with us, Quinn Evans is the architect on the project, and you have a spare mode you're going through here, and there's a document about design plans for using the undercroft to make some kind of museum, and that had always been in people's minds since probably the 70s or so. And I remember seeing a development plan in the late 80s or something like that, because there's an existing tiny little visitor center that we're completely demolishing and replacing that was built in the 90s, which is a replacement of a comfort station, bathrooms that were built in the 70s when they put in the elevator on the south side. So I think lots of people had ruminations of, wouldn't it be cool to build a museum in the underneath the Lincoln Memorial? And it came down to Rubenstein. He's a billionaire. He's ran the Carlyle Group,
Oh,
and
yeah.
he's donated millions of dollars to the National Mall over the years. He put in $18 million for design and construction of as seed money, obviously, for this Undercroft project. And the whole purpose of the museum, we're not building out the entirety of the Undercroft. It's just so that we're going to build a concrete building inside the terrace and inside the Undercroft. So I'm going to go about a third of the way into the Undercroft, and then we're going to do these giant glass windows, so you can look down into the Undercroft
From
from the exhibit level, which is
level.
if you walk up to the memorial right before you walk up to the steps, you can walk over and walk right into
Onto the side.
museum.
That's going to be quite.
No, it's going to be fantastic.
Yeah. So the next time anyone is out there visiting the Lincoln Memorial, which will be completed in
2026.
2026, it would look totally different.
Well, as you walk up to it, it'll look the same. No one's really going to know anything happened.
The experience will be way different.
The fact that you can do more than just commune with Abraham Lincoln up in the chamber, nothing's going to change there. It's all in the interpretation in this great new space where you can actually learn about the memorial itself, its design and construction, and then what it means to the country, because it's been such a stage for so many different things in its 100 years of, I guess, service is the right way to call it. You think of, I think it was in 1938. I might be wrong on the year. Marian Anderson, who was a black opera singer, was turned away from the DAR Hall from providing a concert there. So she gave an open air concert on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. That's one of the things that is going to be interpreted in the exhibits for the new museum.
It's going to be pretty amazing. Obviously, MLK as well.
You can't get away from Martin Luther King's speech, and that was one of the things we did this past summer. So we're putting in the retail area, the bookstore, is underneath the main steps. So for 100 years, it's been more or less just a cave. Mm-hmm. And there's not been any kind of roof or waterproofing, so water just creeps through the concrete, and it's part of the cultural historic fabric, the concrete underneath it. So the park didn't want us to do anything to that concrete, wanted that just to be there. So the plan is to take all the marble steps up, put a waterproof membrane down underneath the steps, and then put them back. So we've gotten half of that done so far, just for the phasing. And this past summer, we took it just past the halfway mark. So that's where the main stone on the landing is, that has the inscription of "I have a dream." This is where Martin Luther King.
I didn't remember you showing that to me. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so created an interesting challenge for us of how do we not stop our work, but at the same time have that stone available, because we had removed it right as the 60th anniversary of the March on Washington came about, because speech was given on August 28th of 1963, and here we are with the stone not there. And thank goodness we weren't doing it during the 50th, because Obama was there.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So let's take a step back. How did Procon get involved in this project? What is your role? And what are some of the other players that are involved in this historic project?
Again, I've had lots of experience with National Park Service projects. I've been doing work for the Park Service since 2009. I did the visitor center at Assateague Island, and then I spent several years at Independence Natural Historical Park doing Benjamin Franklin Court, which is another underground museum. in Independence and a few other smaller projects.
Mm-hmm.
And I spent 4 years at the Gateway Arch. So had lots of exposure to lots of folks at the National Park Service and the way the Park Service procures capital projects at parks. Small projects, a lot of parks have in-house project management and design and construction, but once it gets to a certain value, they just don't have the capacity for doing major capital improvement projects. So they work with the Denver Service Center,
Right.
which, as the name implies, is in Denver. They have the resources to do design and construction. So say you're any park, you have a large project, you're going to go to Denver Service Center.
So what was Procon hired to do?
So on top of procuring design and the contractors, Denver Service Center usually needs to have construction management services. In National Park Service speak, it's CMR, the contract management representative. And that's where Procon gets to play a role in the day-to-day construction operations of this Park Service project. Again, because parks are everywhere, which is quite the logistic issue for the project managers at Denver Service Center. They need to have on-site representatives. So that's how we get to play a role in managing this awesome project.
So everyone understands who a contractor is. Everyone who typically understands the designer or the architect and the engineer. But what exactly is construction manager on a program like this?
In a very 10,000-foot way, our job is to be the eyes and ears for the government. So very lucky to get to more or less just walk around a job site every day. But functionally, that means we are quality assurance.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of our critical roles, is making sure that the contractor's quality control program is adhering to the design,
which is going to be important for a project like this.
Absolutely, especially as we're finally getting close to starting doing real concrete work. So I'll do a lot of inspections in conjunction with the contractor's quality control program. And then outside of the day-to-day inspections and quality assurance, our other main job is to facilitate project meetings every week and help a lot with change management and drive the schedule.
Yeah. So you're kind of there to be an extension of the National Park Service.
Exactly.
Right.
And then also an extension for the architect and
as well.
Designer, because, being on site every day,
you get to kind of see the sausage being made there.
Exactly. And we've got our ear to the ground, so I can anticipate the problems. With a project like this, unforeseen conditions is
pretty key.
A big deal.
We're going to get into that a little bit, but I wonder if you could just tee it up in terms of who are the designers on this project.
The design was done by Quinn Evans Architects, and I've had plenty of history of working with Quinn Evans on other projects.
And they're well known on a lot of these historic projects. That's their
resume with Park Service project is pretty long.
Yes. And what is your role?
So I am the lead CMR.
What is CMR?
Construction Management Representative, and I get to be there on site every day, which is fantastic. And then we actually have two CMRs on the project. My coworker and co-pilot is Marilyn Alcorn, who's just outstanding.
Yeah, she's amazing. So tell me a little bit more about the project. What are you guys working on? Some challenges you might have encountered. How is this thing going to get built?
Most of what we've been doing for the last 8 months or so, because the notice to proceed was back in March of 23, and for the first several months is just been enabling work. Again, all the concrete down there is considered part, historic fabric,
mm-hmm.
and we got to be very delicate and with that. We can't just, as a concrete wall, we can bash against it with a piece of equipment.
Yeah, how is that like working on a project where the structural concrete columns are historical, and yet you need that to structurally build what you're trying to build.
Well, the way that the contract reads and what we've done is we've encased every single column with thousands of square feet of plywood. Plywood that just compresses against the column. We don't physically attach to any of the concrete.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, we will have to start putting some fasteners into the concrete for conduit and other things like that, but that'll be in areas outside of the public view. And then it's just lining all the interior walls with plywood, all the columns. And one of the other things we've been doing is dealing with asbestos in the soil.
Mm-hmm.
So before the project started, we did extensive testing for asbestos. Unfortunately, the only places that we actually found anything were trace amounts in the soil. So in most places where we weren't actually doing any excavation for new foundation work or slab on grade or any of those other type of features, we just put stone and rock over top of it. It's encapsulated. We don't have to touch it. It's safe, and we don't have to worry about it. But for where we're doing extensive construction and excavation, we had to remove 6 inches of the soil.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been a challenge. We're finally past that, and now it's just as we started doing excavation, because so think going back to when I was talking about the original construction of the memorial itself is sitting on concrete caissons,
Mm-hmm.
more or less. They go all the way down to bedrock. After they did that, when they started to build the terrace, they thought they could get away with just shallow foundations and regular grade beams. So within the first couple of months of all of that being in place, it started to settle quickly and a lot. I think it was 4 to 12 inches of sediment in a year, which meant that they had to go back
right.
and excavate under and do some underpinning. Come to find out that the place where that was detailed, because as-builts are always tough to come by on any project, let alone something that's 100 years old, it's in a book. Nice, long, lengthy article written by some Army colonel in the Army Corps of Engineers, where they excavated down, they built, they did cribbing, and they did a underpinning down to the foundations, or not to the foundations, to the bedrock.
So it's good.
Yeah, but the documents don't show that, so we're in the process of dewatering, because we're into the water table, and we'll do some testing to verify that it goes to solid bedrock, and then we'll be able to get started with our actual concrete work.
Well, let me go back to the columns here. Could you talk a little bit about the graffitis?
One of the cool components of this basement was going to never really be open to the public or used for anything. In the crews down there, somebody was a pretty good artist, so was doing all kinds of doodles, and we got some really intricate drawings. One is a caricature of a person who we think might have been the construction foreman, various stuff like that all throughout. And that is going to be preserved as part of the reason why we put all that plywood over all the columns. And that's going to be interpreted.
So when it opens, you would be able to see in these graffitis that the construction workers were doodling on the concrete columns.
Exactly. Which is one of the weird things about working on a historic building. Don't draw on anything. But what your predecessor did 100 years ago, we're going to preserve that and enhance that and really talk about that. It's an interesting dichotomy.
But it tells a great story, right?
100%. As we've done some excavating, we found a whole bunch of, we keep finding every now and then an interesting object. Normally, milk bottles has been the most common artifact we found. We did find a piece of ceramic, a plate, and a bowl, and a couple other bottles, but the most common thing is like a pint milk jug.
So how is it like on a project where challenges are encountered as it relates to whether existing conditions were well documented or you're encountering milk jugs? And also the Lincoln Memorial isn't shut down. There are people walking in and out through. They may not be happy because it's under construction,
No,
but
exactly.
they're still coming in. So what is that construction experience like?
It's always a challenge in keep trying to work around the public. And for this project, the way we set it up, or way it was planned, was for there to be lifts. Because with any park, you need to have it accessible for ADA. And that means having the elevator operational.
Mm-hmm.
And when it's time to take down the elevator, we have to have something in its place to get visitors up to the chamber. So the way it was planned, we were going to use 2 temporary lifts. A lift to get from the lower level up to the landing, and then the final lift to go the final distance up to the chamber. So at some point, actually from the start of the project, one of the point of contacts for the National Mall was very adamant, we can't use these lifts. There's a similar project happening now at the Jefferson Memorial where they have one single lift, which is always not working. Problem with temporary lifts, they're not elevators.
Mm-hmm.
And they're delicate, and you have to know how to operate it. It's generally simple, but when dealing with the public, not everyone realizes that for it to work, you have to push the button, hold the button all the way up to the top. And they bust it all the time. And it was pretty clear with the 8 million visitors that the Lincoln Memorial gets that 2 lifts is going to be just an operational nightmare for the park, as well as for the contractor to try and maintain those things. And we made a decision to switch that from lifts to a gigantic ramp, which we're in the middle of constructing right now.
Gotcha.
I think the very top is going to be the view of the Washington Monument and the Capitol building for the next 2 years. And I think it'll be quite a hit with photographers. But that's how we're maintaining access to the chamber. Because the chamber itself doesn't get any work to it. We're leaving it as is. There's 4 chamber rooms, or 4 rooms on each corner of the chamber. One is the existing bookstore, which is going to close down next week. And then there's the existing elevator lobby, and then a break room, and U.S. Park Police has a little room. So we'll do some minor work in there. But again, that's not going to be part of the public.
I mean, these type of problem solving, it's par for the course for any existing facilities, let alone a facility where you're getting millions and millions of visitors per year. And so how exciting is that you're there getting your hands dirty, problem solving to keep this thing still open and while still trying to preserve and create a lasting historical, landmark.
No, it's one of those things where I do constantly pinch myself, especially in the morning. I'll go up and watch the work of us putting the marble steps back, and I'm standing there, the sun's rising over the Capitol building. And how did I get here? Is this the building I'm working on? This is pretty fantastic.
Now, I have heard that there's an interesting take that your kid has of you and what you do and the project that you're working on.
My 3-year-old, what did you get? I got $1. What's on the dollar? It's the Lincoln Memorial, where Daddy lives, which it's my favorite video of that my 3-year-old.
That is awesome.
No, it is, and it's very exciting. I've been very fortunate in the caliber of projects I've gotten a chance to work on. This is not my first rodeo with trying to keep a major memorial open during construction. I mentioned before I worked at the Gateway Arch, where we completely renovated the tram lobbies and that museum, and then added a 46,000 square foot new west entrance into the memorial, all the while, doing extensive construction around visitors.
And I know that you talked about this earlier, but I wonder, as we're kind of winding down, talking about the Lincoln Memorial, what is the final product going to look like? You had mentioned that you're going to be walking up to the Lincoln Memorial, and at the
At the approachway.
At the approach level, you'll be able to go into this new visitor center.
Right.
So start from there. What is this going to look like?
When we're complete and we take that ramp down, the steps will be restored because we've actually done a whole lot of masonry work, to repair old patches and put in a whole lot of new Dutchman and restored a lot of the marble. But we've used all the original treads are back.
Tread. Yes,
we're right where they were. So that experience, as you walk up the steps to the chamber, that won't change at all. It'll be exactly as it always has been. However, if you stay on the lower level, you go to the right, to the north side, you'll enter in airport-style security, so it'll be a sally port, and you'll go through security, and then you'll go into the interpretive center and the museum itself.
And what will that have? You had mentioned a little bit of it. You'll have, I would imagine, all of the pieces, historical pieces of people, photographs, I would imagine, of people doing famous speeches, MLK obviously being the one that everyone should be aware of, but anything else?
Yeah, so the main feature from a construction standpoint that's going to be very, very cool is because we're extending out the building so that we have that new exhibit floor to peer off of. That's going to terminate. It's going to go past those giant columns, which we're going to leave the concrete exposed, so that you'll be able to really experience that board form, concrete, and to fill the archways, we've got these large heated glass panels, and they're being manufactured. They were manufactured in London. They're now on a boat somewhere between Southampton, UK, and on their way to Norfolk. And from those glass windows, you'll be able to peer down into the undercroft itself. You'll be able to look up, and the far distance where the other mezzanine is, there's going to be screens that will be projecting up images of, for instance, I think the plan is for images of Martin Luther King giving his speech, as well as Marian Anderson and her concert, and whatever else the exhibit designers have in store for us. So there's going to be that immersive form, is what they're calling it, where you'll be able to sit in a bench-type seating and be able to sit there and view that through these glass panels. And then behind that, on the other, in between another row of columns, will be the interpretive with exhibits. And then going further to the east, you'll be able to go to the bookstore and the retail space.
You got to have a bookstore.
Always got to have a bookstore.
Yeah, I know. When I had kids, that was like the thing to go to. Anytime we went to any museums, you have to have a bookstore.
It's a staple.
Well, Patrick, I appreciate you being on the show and sharing the project that you're working on. I know it means a lot to you to be part of that. It's a very proud moment for Procon to have you and to be part of this project. And so do you have any lasting remark before we close?
Stay tuned. It's probably one of the more exciting projects that I'll ever get to work on. I learned a long time ago, never say never, but I definitely got to pinch myself. Most days as I go across the Potomac, I'm going to work there. Look forward to having people actually be able to experience it in 26.
Yeah. So you can go back to your home, Lincoln Memorial, where you can go to bed tonight there. So I really appreciate you being on the show.
And thanks for having me.
Well, that pretty much wrapped things up. Stay tuned for the next episode. We might have to cut out. But go ahead. You're not recording this, are you?
Definitely not.
Okay, good.